Hello there, time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are Mark Ogden from ESPN and Paul McGuinness from The Guardian. Welcome, gents. Let me run you through the back pages. We'll start with The Sun. The main headline on this newspaper, United won't do an Ollie Dash. Michael Carrick says he won't be the next permanent manager and the United hierarchy won't be making a knee-jerk appointment. Also, on the left-hand column there, Verge, stop bullying, Van Dijk's plea to pundits. In the Express, Luis, a non-runner, reports that Luis Enrique is set to snub United in favour of signing a new contract with Paris Saint-Germain. Also, England on a mission to thrill fans as they get their Six Nations campaign underway. In the Mirror, the headline, you want Sem, City new boys. Ain't says they're fired up for COP. In the Star, more from Semeno. Antoine, I'll just be as explosive as Erling Haaland. In the Telegraph, I'll be happy to be hated if it helps rugby. England's golden boy Henry Pollock talks to the Telegraph Sport. In the Times, they splash with a picture of James Milner, the ultimate pro, they say. He can equal the Premier League appearance record when he plays on Saturday. In The Guardian, it's no joke. Team GB skier Kenworthy takes unusual aim at ice. We'll have a bit of a discussion about that one, I'm sure. And also, they splash with Wales's golden boy, Lewis Rees Zammit, who's making his return to the Six Nations after his foray into the NFL. And in the Eye, Guardiola even refuses to focus on football. Man City manager puzzled by reaction to speaking out on conflict. And on ESPN Online, after 5 years of Reynolds and Mack, Wrexham are on the cusp of the Premier League, written by our guest, Mark Ogden. OK, Mark, Paul, great to have you with us on Back Pages tonight. Let's start with the Friday night football. Really important win for Leeds, Mark, against Nottingham Forest. Puts a much-needed breathing space between them and the bottom three. And they'll hope to carry on this momentum to keep charging up the table, won't they?
Yeah, well, after the defeat against Arsenal last week, I think Leeds had to bounce back, and they definitely did that tonight, and Forest looked really poor. I mean, if you're a Forest fan, you'd be quite alarmed at the performance tonight. And I think, obviously, it depends on what West Ham do tomorrow. But if West Ham get a result tomorrow and get a win, then you can see maybe 5 clubs fighting for to avoid that last relegation spot. I think West Ham, Forest, Leeds, Crystal Palace, and even Tottenham. You know, Spurs would only be 6 points clear of Leeds if Leeds win and if West Ham win and Spurs lose. So it's really tight at the bottom. So Leeds winning tonight made it even tighter. So it's a big tight relegation battle at the moment with 5 teams potentially locked in the battle to avoid the drop.
Yeah, we're looking at the back page of the Mirror there. Top of the screen, hell of a win for Leeds, they say. And Paul, this really was a comprehensive win. They looked good in their performance as well. But a word on Nottingham Forest, perhaps, because if results don't go their way at the weekend, they could just be 3 points away from the bottom three.
Yeah, it's very interesting when watching clubs in the lower half of the Premier League this season, because each of them on their day can play, to a high standard, and you could imagine Nottingham Forest even as still being that, they are a Europa League side, and they still, like I said, you'd hold their own sometimes at that kind of level. But it's the consistency that's the problem, and picking out which games clubs are going to turn up for is a really odd one. I was at Brentford the other week where Forest came as visitors and rolled them over. They just had far much more energy and intensity in the match, and it was completely the opposite way around. They were anemic today, and it was Leeds that had all the energy, particularly in the midfield and particularly down the right-hand side, where James Justin, Jayden Bogle really dominated the match. A couple of really unusual goals as well. Bogle's goal came from a sort of striker's run from a guy who's a fullback, and then there was like a perpendicular chested goal from Dominic Calvert-Lewin, which I don't think I've seen anything like that for quite a while. So Daniel Farke said before the game that Leeds were going to have to fight every minute if they were going to stay in the Premier League, and that was the sort of performance he got tonight. It was that level of energy. I think the one crumb of comfort, I think, might be for Forest, that despite the abysmal performance, in the last 15, 20 minutes of the game, they could have scored 3 goals themselves and did get that one consolation from their new striker, 6'7", Luca, who put away a decent header, actually. It was quite an impressive take. So that's maybe a little bit of consolation.
OK, so Leeds going well at the moment. Another team going well, Manchester United. Back page of The Sun. United won't do an Ollie dash. Carrick rules out knee-jerk appointment. This is quite clear-cut comments from Carrick, Mark. Michael Carrick adamant that Manchester United will not make an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer-style knee-jerk change and make him the permanent manager, which is an interesting claim because presumably if he carries on to do well and carries on getting a tune out of these players, surely the hierarchy will have to consider him for next season, won't they?
Well, yeah, they would have to. But I think we all have to kind of put the brakes on a little bit. It's 3 games that he's been in charge and, 3 wins, 3 great performances. And obviously there's an optimism at United now that they'll qualify for the Champions League. There's a real sense of momentum behind Carrick. And I think obviously if he keeps it going, it would seem foolish to just throw that away to turn to somebody else who might not have the same kind of impact on the team. But, 3 games in, we don't know what's going to happen yet. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer won his first 8 games in charge and got the job, and then it didn't really work out. Although, to be fair to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he did get a runners-up spot in the Premier League during his time in charge. So, United have got a bit of a problem in the sense that Carrick is maybe doing a little bit too well. I think what they would ideally have wanted was him to come in, steady the ship, finish top 6, get back into Europe and kind of do well, but not so well where he becomes a candidate again. But he's doing well. He may become a candidate. If that happens, they're going to have to make a decision at some point, I reckon, in the next 4 to 6 weeks, because once they get past that stage, players are going to want to know who they're going to sign for next summer. Managers that they may want to approach, maybe like Thomas Tuchel, Carlo Ancelotti, these sorts of guys, they'll want people to be in touch now. They don't want to wait until the World Cup finishes because that's mid-July. If you're taking on a club like Man United, you need to get your preparations in well before the middle of the summer. So United can't let it drift until the end of the season. And Carrick suggesting that it will wait till the end of the season. Well, it can't really wait that long. But right now, he's doing well, but it's 3 games. Let's see where he is in another 10, maybe.
Yeah, Paul, it is only 3 games. They've got a big game against Spurs coming up. It could be 4 wins in a row. But what is it Carrick has to do to put himself in the frame? What has he got to do to get this job?
Well, if he wins 2 more games on the trot, he gets to take that lad for a haircut. And
more importantly,
that would be probably one of the images of the season, and I think he put that in his CV. So that'd stand him in good stead. I think it's a really good point Mark raises, and I think Michael sort of raises it himself in his remarks. I think it's like he's raising the question: what is it that United actually want from their permanent manager? They clearly they want somebody with a track record. And that seems to be the implication of what he's saying. Somebody who's, is proven. The question is, who is available that Manchester United can recruit who fits that template and isn't currently in an international job, which is going to take them to the World Cup? Because I think Mark quite rightly mentions Tuchel. You've also got Nagelsmann at Germany. You've got other people who might come out of international roles after the tournament, but aren't going. Pochettino as well, obviously, but they're not going to talk about it. They're certainly not going to sign a deal before the tournament. So I think that's their best hope of getting that kind of high caliber candidate, but they're going to have to wait for that. And so I think that leaves them in a little bit of a tricky position because obviously the shine has maybe come off Oliver Glasner a little bit in the past few weeks.
Yeah, and talking of high-caliber candidates, Mark, back page of The Express, Luis Anon runner, Luis Enrique set to snub Manchester United in favour of signing a new contract with Paris Saint-Germain. So he's a high-caliber candidate, there's no denying that. Is he the right fit for United, even if he wanted the job?
Well, United looked at Luis Enrique in 2022, so after Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had been sacked and they went on a 6-month mission to find a new coach and ended up without Ten Hag. Luis Enrique was on their list, but he made it pretty clear that he didn't want to leave the Spain job until after the World Cup in Qatar. So that would have meant missing the start of the season. So United backtracked out of that. But people at the club still obviously rate him very highly. His track record is incredible. There is a suggestion that he might be a candidate for Man City and even Liverpool if Arne Slot leaves. So I think if United were looking at Luis Enrique, they'd have a lot of competition. And whether he's the right guy for Man United right now, one of the best coaches in the world, but whether the squad at United is to his kind of requirements, and can they afford to build a squad for his requirements? That's the question. So I think right now Luis Enrique is an unlikely candidate. It'd be a dream candidate if they had the squad of players to bring into the club. But I just think you bring Enrique in, I just think it wouldn't be compatible with the players there. So I think they're looking at coaches who would be able to work with what they've got. But it's hard. It's a difficult one because I disagree with Paul a little bit. I think if you're one of the guys at the World Cup and he's out of contract at the end of the World Cup, I think that those coaches are within their rights to line up a job now, so they've got somewhere to go after the World Cup. I think, fans might not like it, but if your contract expires at the end of the World Cup, you are able to, find a new job. It wouldn't be disloyal. It'd be better to do it now and clear the air rather than let it drag on across during the World Cup. So if Thomas Tuchel, for instance, was approached by Man United in March and agreed to take the job, I don't see a problem with that. That would be better than Thomas Tuchel going to the World Cup and spending every press conference for every England game answering questions about are you going to go to Man United or not. So, I think we have to grow up a little bit and realise that managers have jobs that they want to go to as well. But Man United have got to decide who they want first.
Yeah, this story also says that reports claimed United representatives have travelled to Paris to hold talks with the former Barcelona and Spain boss, Paul. Is this an easy decision for Luis Enrique then? What else has he got to achieve at PSG and in France? He's seemingly won it all. Would he not want a fresh challenge in the Premier League?
I feel with Luis Enrique that I think when he won the Champions League last summer, he gave off the air of somebody who had climbed all the peaks he needed to in his career. And I think that might be an indication of why he might be receptive to United, that he doesn't necessarily feel he has anything to prove. I think the other thing you have to take into account with Luis Enrique is, he works for Nasser Al Khalifi at Paris Saint-Germain, who is backed by the Qatari state. They do not want to lose their key personnel, and they don't make a habit of losing them, as we saw with Kylian Mbappe. They sort of go when they want them to. So that will be another complication. They'd have to go quite hard to get him anyway. I think, as Mark says, there'll be interest from other clubs too. I think it's would have been a big challenge to get him, and I'm not sure he's the man. And I think they'll probably have other irons in the fire.
Yeah, other irons in the fire. Mark, just to come back to you quickly on this, because we've mentioned a few names there in the frame for possibly getting the job after Carrick. Who else might be in the frame for this United job?
Well, I think Carlo Ancelotti, his contract with Brazil expires after the World Cup. Paul mentioned Pochettino, obviously Tuchel. They're the obvious ones that are out of contract in the summer. I think people like Oliver Glasner, his kind of reputation is taken a bit of a battering by what's happened at Palace, Andoni Iraola. But I think what Carrick has done in recent weeks has kind of elevated him above a lot of those candidates. I think the only people that are ahead of him right now, you'd say, are the likes of Tuchel and Ancelotti. I think if Carrick did well, got him into the Champions League, and then he said, thanks, Michael, we're going to appoint Mauricio Pochettino or Andoni Iraola, I don't think it would wash with the fans, because those guys haven't got the successful track record that United demand. So if you're going to go for a coach that has won something, great. If you're going to replace Carrick with somebody who's not really won anything, what's the point?
Yeah, and the United hierarchy really have to get this right, don't they, after the mistakes made with Eric Ten Hag and then getting rid of Ruben Amorim. OK, we're going to take a break, Paul, Mark, but when we come back, we'll be looking at more of the sports stories in the morning's newspapers, including this in The Star. The headline, Semtex. Antoine, I'll be just as explosive as Erland. City's new signing, Antoine Semeno, with big talk ahead of the Super Sunday game with Liverpool. We'll be discussing that in just a few minutes.
now around football in terms of pundits, and I think they're more outspoken than ever, and that's great because that's what we want, a pundit or an analyst to give an opinion and to be strong on that opinion. So the noise is incessant, and I guess the players that are making these comments, the guys that are probably late 40s, early 50s now that played maybe late 90s, early 2000s, didn't have the same kind of pressure on them coming from so many voices. So I guess it is difficult for younger players. You know, they're on social media all the time. They're on so many platforms, and they will hear the noise, they will see the noise. So yeah, I can imagine it is quite draining and difficult for younger players. But I guess if you play for one of the big clubs, you're going to have that anyway. You're going to have that kind of scrutiny. But I suppose there are times when it does go, I won't say it goes over the top, because I think pundits are entitled to their opinion, but they can be quite blunt and quite hard. And if you're a player that's not achieving very much, or you're failing to achieve, then yeah, I can imagine it's just an additional pressure that they don't need.
Yeah, Paul, Van Dijk saying that I can deal with it, but I am a bit worried for the next generation. And it's true, isn't it? You play for a big club, you expect that scrutiny, but the level of scrutiny at this point in the game is probably stronger and more intense than we've ever known it as professional footballers, isn't it?
I think you're right, to be honest. I think that's a very fair appraisal. Because I was going to say, I don't think pundits are necessarily any harsher than they have ever been. And I think, in fact, there's a lot more sort of willingness to try and understand what's going through a player's mind and what might be affecting them when they're playing nowadays. And there's a lot more consideration of players as human beings. But it is 24/7. And I think Virgil van Dijk in his interview does make this distinction between sort of pundits and social media. And I think that is an important one, because I think while a lot of these pundits, what they say in the first place, often on a podcast or a TV show, is one thing. What becomes the conversation online and social media afterwards is often something different. And I think that is when it can go a little bit further, become a little bit more heated. And Virgil van Dijk is saying, this is where players spending all their time after matches getting feedback on their performance. So they're all, doom scrolling effectively and finding out all this stuff. And I think that's the challenge. And I think it's the great line from Virgil. He says, you can say you shouldn't be on social media, but they don't listen. I mean, I have told them many times. So, he's tried, but it's a big challenge because it's so important to their kind of self-expression.
Yeah, it really is. And it's such a part now, isn't it, of everyday life. It's so normalised. OK, staying with the Premier League and looking ahead to a fantastic matchup for Super Sunday. Liverpool hosting Manchester City at Anfield. Back page of the Star, the headline, Semtex. Antoine, I'll be just as explosive as Erling. Semeno insists that he can match Manchester City goal machine Erling Haaland's scoring impact at the Etihad. And Mark, he's already scored 4 goals for the Blues since moving last month. And it coincides with Erling Haaland falling off of form a little bit as well. It feels like Semeno could be the player to keep them in the title race.
Well, he's done that so far in his first month at the club. You're right, the goals he scored, he has kept City, within touching distance of Arsenal. They have fallen back a bit, but they're still there thanks to Semeno's impact. And I saw him on the first day of the season. It was a Friday night at Liverpool for Bournemouth, and he was outstanding that night. And I think he's maintained that all season. And I guess, we're at that stage of the season, we're talking about potential footballers of the year. And I don't think Semeno's getting much of a shout, but he probably deserves to be in contention because he was outstanding for Bournemouth. He's gone to City and he's not even kind of changed his stride. He's probably gone up a level at City. And a lot of players got big clubs and struggle to settle. He's actually just take it in his stride, like I say. And I think Liverpool were keen to sign him this in January. Man United were keen to sign him in January. City got him. And although they have, fallen back a little bit on Arsenal, he is the sort of player that could score the goals, could take him to the title and take him past Arsenal.
How impressed have you been with him, Paul? And how integral will he be to Manchester City keeping up with Arsenal in the title race?
Oh, I mean, I think Mark described it very well there, the impact he's had. And I've been very impressed with him too, the mentality in particular, the ability to take it all in his stride. I'm trying to think of a Guardiola team, another outside forward, wide forward, whose primary kind of contribution to the team is finishing, is goal scoring, is getting in positions to make that difference. And I can't readily think of one. And I think that's for City to have that kind of weapon in their armoury alongside Haaland, it's big trouble for everybody because City always create a lot of chances. And what I think they found in the last 18 months in particular, if it wasn't Haaland scoring them, who was? But Semeno doesn't need to be asked twice to finish a chance. And obviously we know he's incredibly dangerous in the transition as well. So yeah, I mean, I think he could be a very significant figure, and it's going to be really interesting to see how he fits into the rotation of the squad, because he's sort of already giving this sort of slight air that he might be more of a fixture in the team in the way that Haaland is too.
Yeah, we'll see if he can keep up this incredible record that he's got going already. If anything's for sure, he's got the confidence, hasn't he? Judging by his quotes in the newspapers. OK, we're going to go to the back page of the Times. A couple of players in their headlines on the back page. Sandro, Tonali and Cristiano Ronaldo, two much discussed players over the last few days. Let's start with Sandro Tonali, Mark. Newcastle exit hint puts Europe's elite on alert. And it seems when news came out on deadline day, and I was here in the morning where we reported that possibly Sandro Tonali had been offered or wanted to move to Arsenal. There was some link between him and Arsenal. It was laughed away, but it seems perhaps there's no smoke without fire here.
No, and I think Tonali's agent is adding to the smoke and adding to the fire. I think it's quite naughty on his part to be saying what he's saying and kind of coming out and, you don't have to read between the lines. He's basically saying that in the summer, Sandro Tonali will be open to offers, basically. And it's a bit like the Alexander Isak situation last year. You get the sense that there's a bit of momentum towards something, and it's hard for Newcastle to stop it. And, Newcastle, they're a big club, Newcastle, but they do struggle to keep their players for a lengthy period of time. Isak was the latest of many over the years that have left after 2 or 3 years. And I think Tonali has had a very successful time there after his long gambling ban. People say that maybe he should show some loyalty to Newcastle for standing by him. Well, that isn't really the case. Newcastle stood by Tonali because it was an investment as well, and they didn't want to kind of lose their transfer fee. So, both sides benefited from him coming back and doing well. But I do think that it's not great for Newcastle. And I think if you're Newcastle, you'd be very unhappy with Tonali's agent for what he said, but you might not be surprised. That's what happens. Yeah,
and a very unwelcome distraction ahead of their big match-up on Saturday, hosting Brentford. OK, staying with the Times, on their back page again, Ronaldo absent again for Al Nassr amid PIF dispute. Paul, how do you solve a problem like Cristiano Ronaldo? He's not happy at the supposed lack of investment in the squad in comparison to his rivals. He said he was back in training because we saw him. He posted a picture on his social media, but again, he's missed another game.
Yeah, I mean, Ronaldo runs on his own rules, doesn't he? He runs on his own train set. It's an interesting. Is he bigger than the Saudi Pro League? That's the question here, isn't it? I mean, because he is ostensibly on face value, what he's saying is he wants the Saudi league to be better, more competitive, for that money to be spread at everybody, kind of bringing in the same level of resources to make the competition better. And he has done an incredible job as being the figurehead of that competition. Whatever you say, he has been the face of it, and he's generated the headlines. But at the same time, is he sort of in his own way, and not unlike Sandro Tonali's agent, setting up in process a narrative which allows him to leave Saudi Arabia eventually. That he can say, I was trying my best, I never let my standards drop, it was you who let me down. And will the Saudis allow that to run? Because he's 40, is he past his best? Or do they need him? That's the big question.
That is the question. We've come to time. Paul McInnes, Mark Ogden, thank you for your company on Backpage. It's been a pleasure to have you. It's available as a podcast. As always, if you've missed any of the show, just download on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Coming next here on Sky Sports News, Leeds are 9 points clear of the relegation zone.